Hello there and welcome to Dateline Abuja. I'm Kayla Megwa. The complacency has set in as infections and deaths from COVID-19 continue to rise in the country. This week on Dateline Abuja, we narrow our lenses on the transport sector. What's the level of compliance to COVID-19 guidelines among transporters in the nation's capital? Do passengers know what to demand from drivers so they can protect themselves? And what about the informal transport sector? Who checks their compliance level to the guidelines? All these answers and more coming up on this week's episode of Dateline Abuja. As at the 2006 National Census, the FCT has a population of about 1.4 million people. According to the United Nations World Population Prospects, the population figure for the nation's capital is estimated at 3.3 million in 2020. The UN report is projecting the FCT population to hit 5.1 million by 2030. The nation's capital is back to its usual overcrowded bus stops and taxis, and these days it's rare to find passengers wearing face masks. It's almost as though we've moved on from the pandemic, which is strange because the pandemic is still very much with us, with rising infections and deaths, especially in the nation's capital. Enforcing compliance to the COVID-19 guidelines set up by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 is in the hands of subnationals. And in Abuja, law enforcement agencies claim to be doing their best to ensure compliance. Obviously, their best is not enough. So what are the challenges and are there solutions? Let's take a look at compliance levels in Abuja's transport sector. Thousands of people working in public and private sectors but living on the outskirts of the nation's capital rely on public transportation system to commute from their homes to the office daily. According to the Dubai-based Urban Mobility Innovation Index report, in 2016, about 57% of trips are by public transport and shared taxis in Abuja. The report adds that 70% of the workforce in Abuja lives in the suburbs and feed into the city center every morning on weekdays and return in the evenings. This explains the rush for vehicles at these times. During these rush hours, passengers at some of the city's most popular bus stops like AYA and Berger Roundabout pay little attention to the COVID-19 guidelines. Passengers cramped at bus stops, some not using face masks, and the driver exceeding the requirements as stated in the COVID-19 guidelines.
Those vehicles that are intercity, that has no bus stop to stop, they are not union. Some of them are just government civil servant going to work, and I have to pick one or two so that I should get the fuel money. And some of them are some different companies. Those are the challenges of intercity. But a unionist member knows that we have our own task force in the intercity. If you caught any union member picking more than what the law say, he violated. Any vehicle that we see violate, they will arrest him. We have no less than 30 vehicles that our people have arrested this morning just because of this. And every day by day, that is the work we are doing.
Prior to the reopening of public transport, the FCT Directorate of Road Traffic Services issued the guidelines for public transport operations. The guidelines directed all taxis to convey only 3 passengers, 1 in the front seat and 2 at the back seat. All buses are to convey 1 passenger in the front seat and 2 passengers on other seats with minimum contact maintained. While all high-capacity buses are to operate at 50% of its capacity and standing is no longer allowed. The buses are fumigated while the passengers and their luggage are sanitized before they board. The vehicles convey the stipulated capacity.
They actually did not give us hand sanitizer, and we did not wash our hands. But I'm very sure that each and every one of us have our own sanitizer with us. So, I have my own right here, so I use it like every 5 minutes. If they don't give me, I will take care of myself. It's supposed to be social distancing, but I've not seen any social distancing. Though, yeah, it's on a seat. It was formerly 3 per person, 3 people per seat. But now at least I'm seeing great improvements. 2 people per seat. Maybe they will start doing 1 person per seat. Anyways,
the passenger we carry on this side, Sienna now, as you see, is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Before is 7. But we have reduced the passenger. Any car before you put motor for pit, they will bring this. They have to disinfect the car first before they allow you to put it on the pit first to start loading.
But this is not usual, at least according to this passenger.
There was nothing, no washing of hands. People are just coming in, no checking of temperature. However, I want to believe it is not their fault. I want to believe it is the fault of maybe it's Abuja Municipal Council or whatever you call it. Because if there is strict compliance, I want to assure you that the people will follow the normal procedure. However, the moment they noticed that the press came in, they started moving around, telling everybody to be compliant. And I want to believe that at least that is a step in the right direction. But initially, there was nothing like that. And it goes further. I would rather like to say that probably there's a need for more stringent measures from the government so that people will follow what they are supposed to. People will do what they are supposed to do without anybody forcing them to do what they have to do.
If you come through the gate, we have tanks that have water and hand sanitizer. Anybody that's coming to the park must wash his hand. After washing his hand, we have a thermometer that will check your temperature of the person that's coming inside the park, whether by trekking or inside car. If we see the temperature is high, we will keep you aside and call the necessary people consigned to check you. And if you look at the parks, we have a fumigation machine that we will fumigate the vehicle before the passengers started entering. Then we will fumigate each of the passengers before he entered the vehicle. We are not law enforcement agencies. And sometimes the personnel, the personnel will come that they are personnels that somebody even came this morning that the person that he brought, he has asthma, this and that. I will tell him, please, it's just for a matter of, we cannot identify whether he has asthma or not. He's a police officer, he says this is that. So that is the only challenges we are facing from the law enforcement agencies. They should be posting police officers or civil defense officers at the parks so that in case of any challenges like this, they will intervene and explain to their people in a polite way. Maybe they will understand themselves better than what we are trying to do.
Physical distancing is not practiced in the park. Aside from commuters cramping together to board their vehicles, there is no lounge for passengers to wait before boarding their vehicles.
If the government can make a place available for all the passengers where they'll come and sit down and maintain distance so that they can enter vehicle one by one, I think that is the government can do that for us. That would be okay. To see people hanging around by the side of the car vehicle is not good. We need government to help us.
We put all the guidelines in the park here. We have washing hand. Before the vehicle move, we do the sanitize. We fumigate the vehicles. So these are things put in place before the vehicle can be able to move to their various destinations.
For the operators, implementing the guidelines comes with a cost, and the passengers have to bear that cost.
Most of the passengers, they say the price is too high because we only carry formally is 1.7 to Mina. But since this COVID-19, we multiply times 3 instead of 4. We carry 3. So that inconvenience. Now we carry me at 2.5 instead of 1.7 because of they reduce about 1 passengers. So that distance. So we only, instead of 4 motor, we carry 3.
Law enforcement agencies are saddled with the responsibility of ensuring compliance with the guidelines.
You carry more than the number of passengers your vehicle is supposed to carry. First of all, you will drop them and we issue you a ticket. Those are the sanctions. And that ticket we are issuing you is an overloaded ticket we are giving you. And of course, apart from going to pay for the fine of overloading, which is 10,000 naira, you will also be subjected to go to the hospital to carry out a test we call psychological emotional evaluation test. That result, you must bring it, and we will check that result. Of course, that is not only to people who carry overload. That test result we expect is people who beat traffic lights, people who also use phone while driving, and people who drive dangerously, and people who take one way. We call it route violation. We have our team here that goes to the garages and even terminals of fleet operators to ensure that these guidelines are followed. And they bring reports on a daily basis. Once in a while, we send them out to give them a specific timing to monitor people within the town, especially high-density environment where vehicles move. Let's see who are those people that are really using this thing correctly.
The FCT administration has mobile courts in strategic locations to try anyone found culpable for violating the guidelines. Nevertheless, there's a clear chance that the different measures being put in place in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic may amount to nothing if the gaps in public transport operation are not quickly addressed. Because transport is not an option, it's a daily necessity. Strict supervision and enforcement of the guidelines is one place to start bridging that gap. Thanks for staying with us. How can we get citizens in the nation's capital, especially in the transport sector, to adhere to these guidelines when law enforcement is not looking? This behavior by both passengers and transporters is linked to the fact that many people still do not believe there's a virus in the country. And even those who do believe the figures are inflated and claim some political conspiracy to excuse their behavior. Is there a need for more advocacy? Or is it too late to get transporters to own the process and join the fight against COVID-19? In the interview segment, I speak to Mr. Atta Ikaro, the chairman of the FCT Ministerial Task Team on COVID-19, who's no stranger to managing transport operations in the nation's capital. Thank you so much, Mr. Atta, for speaking with us.
Thank you very much, my wonderful sister.
Let's talk a bit about the guidelines for transporters during this COVID-19 era. With passengers, as they're entering buses, let's say public transportation within the nation's capital right now, what should the passengers be looking out for?
Once you are entering, the first thing is for you to understand the guidelines that actually guides the transport system under COVID-19. The first thing, if you are entering the bus should not be overloaded. That's the first thing. Most of the drivers at the initial point when we come out from the lockdown, they had sanitizers, they had everything. So you must be very careful. Carry your own personal sanitizer because most of them are not even having at the moment here. Yeah, at the motor park we have some, and not all the time people use them. Even the washing of hand points here, they don't use them all the time. We've tried to enforce that, and we discover that sadly these things are used when they see task force around. So if you are entering, the first thing is to ensure and look out for your own safety very importantly. Try and put on your face mask. Ensure that the bus is not overcrowded. You must ensure it's not overcrowded here and learn to speak up here. And also, be very careful. If you don't have your face mask on, learn to go home and get them. Don't allow drivers. I know some buses we have caught, the driver was having about 8 or 9 face masks. Once he sees us, task force, VIO, road safety, he starts to, who not get here? He starts to share the face mask. When they finish, they return it back to him. Those things are things that people should guide against and look out for and ensure that those things don't take place when they are traveling.
These challenges keep coming up, but just so you can, shed more